I never play monks or martial arts characters in role-playing games. I don't play them in CRPGs on the computer, and I don't play them on tabletop RPGs. Why? Because every time I've tried, I've found them poorly made, horribly executed, and absolutely boring to play. Today, I want to talk to you about how grappling works in Fists and Fiends. But before we get there, let's talk about what I don't like in other role-playing games, and some of them pretty famous, and why I ended up making my own martial arts RPG instead of using something that already exists. I'm Randy Brown, creator of Fists and Fiends, and let's grab onto this topic and throw it to the wolves. What inspired me to make this video next is yesterday I saw a creator make a video about Pathfinder's grappling rules, comparing their first edition to their second edition. Now, the video was exceptionally well done. The rules were clear, concise, understood what they were trying to say. However, I had two words that kept coming to mind as I was watching the video, and neither of them had anything to do with the creator. The first, trigonometry. It reminded me of trigonometry class. Completely obtuse, disinteresting, boring, and absolutely makes no sense unless you go out and you actually try to build things, and then you can actually find a purpose for it. However, unlike trigonometry, the rules of grappling in these RPGs don't make any sense. Nor would you get them to work in a real-world application. Now, the second word that kept coming to mind was boring. Oh my God. The first edition, you had to make 4 rolls in order to be able to successfully grapple someone else. And the list of modifiers, pluses to this, minus to that, ifs, thens, buts, my would have fine Christmas we'd have. Horribly complicated. Absolutely insane that someone thought this was a good idea. And the second edition, which was supposed to be simpler, allows for somebody to be able to cast a spell with an 80% chance of success while you're grabbing them, while you're choking them, trying to throw them, controlling them. They're supposed to be able to somatically move their arms around and recite incantations at that level of success. Not only that, someone is able to use a two-handed sword while you're grappling them. And the person doing the video claimed that this was all in the name of balance. If you're putting balance before logic, you're going down the wrong path and you need to find your way back. These rules were insanely complicated and made no sense in the world of real fighting. And here's a PSA for companies like Wizards of the Coast and Paizo. You have deep pockets. When you make a game, you should hire experts when you want to dip your toes into waters that have sharks in them. If you were making a game about Top Gun, you would hire fighter pilots, or you should hire fighter pilots. And if you don't, that's negligence. The same if you're building martial arts characters and monks in your role-playing games and you don't know martial arts yourself, or you don't hire martial artists, that's also negligence. You need to hire people like me. Not me, because I have my own game now. But you need to find people like me who are experts in the fields when you're going to put something like this in a game. Otherwise, you need to make it so vague that you don't try to over-explain something that you don't understand. Which is why generally I find monks to be boring in most RPGs. One of my pet peeves with combat in role-playing games is boredom. Is the time it takes from the turn one player takes to the next player. And if your combat is so complicated or intricate that it slows down the pacing of the game and people are grabbing their cell phones in between turns, or they're cross-table chatting with somebody else and not paying attention, that's a problem. because when it comes around to their turn, they're not paying attention, and now it slows the game down even more, and you have to take 20 minutes for them to figure out where everybody else was at, what just happened, what the bad guys are doing, and then decide what they're going to do next. And this all comes down to the rules. So when we had somebody do a review of Fists and Fiends, they said it was rules light, which I found surprising because there are a lot of rules. And one of the most challenging things for me was taking all of the experience that I have in martial arts and trying to get this out of my head and into a rule book where somebody else could quickly and easily pick it up and run the game without having martial arts experience. When I heard that comment, I actually was very happy that it came across that way, because what I did not want was bloat and something being overly complicated, especially unnecessarily. When it comes to something like grappling in a role-playing game, it can quickly get out of hand. Trust me, I know, because several times over the creation of Fists and Fiends, I had to walk myself back. In the name of accuracy and something being true and realistic, it became boring very easily. There's a fine line there. So we have to know when to pull back and say, yeah, that would be more accurate, but now it's starting to get a little bit slow and boring, and now the pace around the table is completely destroyed. In Fists and Fiends, we want the combat to be tense, to be anxiety-inducing. And one thing that I really tried to achieve with the creation of this game is that you have to be invested in what's going on even when it's not your turn. There are backgrounds and characters in the game that are very much supposed to do their actions on somebody else's turn, and it can make or break the success of that mission. Let me step down off of my soapbox, which is a traveling soapbox, by the way. I can take it anywhere. So if you're interested in a seminar, I'm happy to oblige. But seriously, let me pull it off the throttle, stop ripping on other games, and let's talk about how I solved these problems in Fists and Fiends and how grappling works. Grappling is a huge component in this game. In Chinese martial arts especially, they're divided into 4 primary pillars. You have striking, you have kicking, you have throwing or wrestling, and then you have submissions, which include joint locks and chokes. These pillars can be martial arts in and of themselves. You look at Western boxing, it's all striking. You look at something like Taekwondo in the Olympics, it's all kicking. You look at wrestling and Shuaijiao and Judo and BJJ. They're all grappling and submission oriented. So it being one of the primary pillars and such a critical component of the game, it's very important that this get done well, be accurate as much as possible, but easy and fast to pick up and learn so that the players can enjoy the game. In order to grapple in Fists and Fiends, you first have to do a grapple attempt. That's where you're actually vying for the grips and trying to get a hold of your opponent. This is a fast action. Then, in order to do an attack, you have to do a slow action, grapple attack. Now, on each turn, you get a fast action and a slow action, or 2 fast actions. So you can grab onto somebody and do an attack on your turn in that one round, a round being 5 to 10 seconds. If you miss your grapple attempt, you can then take a second fast action to try again. There are some throws, trips, and takedowns that do not require a grapple attempt. These are rare. There's only 3: single leg, double leg, and crashing tide. Each of those you can be within melee range and immediately go to your grapple attack, still being a slow action, but you would have a fast action in reserve. An enemy with grapple standing skills or grapple ground, if we're talking about the monkey boxer and trying to do submissions or chokes on the ground, if the other person has a skill in grapple standing or grapple ground, they can oppose your roll. They can use a fast action to try to stop it. And the player can do that as well. Now, in some instances, you don't need to use a grapple attempt before going because the opponent grabs you first. In that case, you can also just go to a grapple attack. If on your turn you got a grapple attempt on the second action, you wait until your next turn, and as long as the enemy didn't escape on their turn, then you can make your attack then and still have an action in the bank. Now, opposing a grapple works like this. If you're trying to do a standing grapple attack, the enemy can try to oppose that or a grapple attempt by using an action themselves. If on your turn you have a fast action left over, you can also oppose an enemy grapple attack. This works in grapple ground as well, the same way. If someone else has skill in grapple ground and you're trying to do a grapple attack on the ground, they can oppose the roll. If they have no skill in that, then they can't oppose the roll because they don't even understand the nature of the attack. However, they can still escape on their turn or attempt an escape without training, because escape, a slow action, can be grapple standing, grapple ground, agility, or a strength roll. And this represents somebody being stronger or faster or squirrely and getting out of your grips before you get a chance to do another attack. However, like I said, that costs them a slow action, so they can't escape on their turn and then do an attack against you. So there is a benefit there. Some weapons in the game can be used inside the grapple as well, but you cannot use longer weapons once you are engaged in the grapple. You also cannot be throwing kicks, but your character could learn elbow and knee strikes and be able to use those effectively inside the grapple. Now, before we talk about types of grapple attacks, let's discuss weight class. Weight class can change our ability to succeed in combat. Somebody bigger, stronger than you is going to be harder to attack, harder to do a submission, whether it's a choke, an armbar, or a throw. Somebody smaller than you is going to be harder to get your grips on. You look at the enemy's weight class, and if they're 2 or more weight classes below you, you need an extra success at a grapple attempt. If they are 2 or more weight classes above you, you need an extra success in your grapple attack. Very simple, very easy. Those are the only modifiers that you have to worry about. Now let's talk about one of the coolest aspects of Fists and Fiends, chokes. Chokes are a lot of fun, but they were one of the most challenging components to build and to represent accurately in a game without it becoming boring. Now, chokes work the same way as other grapple attacks. First, you have to do a grapple attempt and get your grips. Then, once you have position, you can go for your grapple attack. You just choose your technique being a choke rather than a submission or a throw or a trip takedown. On your first successful choke attack, you can't stunt and you can't push that round. A round is 5 to 10 seconds. And when you're actually choking a person, you can't choke them out that quickly. So on your next turn, providing they didn't escape, you get to roll another choke attack. And the purpose of this is to see if you succeed. If you did, then you get to roll a crit. There are 6 outcomes with crits, anywhere from breaking someone's teeth or jaw to crushing their trachea to actually knocking them out with asphyxiation or choking them out with a blood choke. So there are 2 types of chokes generally when we talk about chokes. There are breath chokes and blood chokes. Breath chokes take longer. They tend to be just cutting off the windpipe and the airflow. And then blood chokes, which attack the arteries, which stop blood flow to the brain and are more effective at a faster pace. When you are rolling for a crit, some chokes are more difficult than others, and they require 2 successes to pull off. However, those chokes are also more effective, so you get to roll your crit twice and take the higher number. Now, can somebody get out of a choke? Absolutely. They could try to escape, but where choke attacks are a slow action, on your turn, providing you didn't let go, you're still grappled. So when the enemy tries to escape, you can use your fast action that's left over to oppose that roll. Now, another benefit to having a choke on an enemy is when it is their turn, they have to make a stamina roll before they do anything else. If they fail their stamina roll, they take 1 might damage. And this is showing not that they took physical damage, but they're exerting themselves and exhausting themselves, something that is very much a reality in real fighting. Usually, untrained people just tire themselves out and then you can do whatever you want. Now, let's bring weight class back into the conversation. When we're talking about weight class and we have those extra successes that are required, well, there's a way out of that. Once you achieve a skill level 4 or higher in your grapple standing or your grapple ground skill, that's no longer a problem. You no longer have that extra success required. And that's to show that at your experience level, you already know how to deal with somebody who's bigger and stronger than you or smaller and faster. The objective of Fists and Fiends at its heart is to be a combat simulator for martial arts. It's to really capture the essence of what it feels like to fight with your hands and feet, whether you're facing off with an armed or unarmed opponent, and all of the nuance that happens without it being bogged down. Because at the end of the day, we want the combat to feel tension-inducing, fast-paced, and gritty. We want it to give you the player that feeling of a real fight. And we also want to keep them engaged when it's not their turn. That's it. I'm Randy Brown, and that is Fists and Fiends Grappling. Until next time, keep choking, snapping, throwing, tripping, and taking down those fiends.